Hello, I'm Sally Wiener Grotta, and this is Judith Magazine's Tell Me More, where I chat with Jewish authors, editors, and other creatives about the stories behind their creations. Today, my guest is Zeeva Bukai. I met Zeeva at the AWP conference where we were both presenting. After just a few minutes of conversation, I knew I would have to interview Zeeva. She is the author of the novel, The Anatomy of Exile, which is this year's winner of the National Jewish Book Award for a debut fiction. That's so exciting. And she'll be receiving that this week at a New York gala. I haven't read Anatomy of Exile yet, but I've just finished Zeeva's second novel, which was released just last month, and it held me in its grip for 2 days. I have a feeling that it's going to haunt me for some time to come. It's a magnificent piece of literature. Zeeva's short stories, which I now have to read, have appeared in CARVE, The Master's Review, McSweeney's Quarterly, Concern, December Magazine, Lilith, and elsewhere. She is the recipient of the Master's Review Fall Fiction Prize, the Curt Johnson Prose Award, and the Lilith Fiction Award. Her work has been anthologized in Smashing the Tablets, Radical Retellings of the Hebrew Bible, which is right up my alley. Frankly Feminist short stories by Jewish women from Lilith Magazine, and Out of Many, Multiplicity and Divisions in America Today. Having earned an MFA from Brooklyn College, she also received fellowships from the Center for Fiction, Byrdcliff AIR program, and Hedgebrook. Welcome, Zeeva, and congratulations on both the Jewish Book Council Award and on the new novel. All such exciting stuff.
Thank you so much. I had such a wonderful time at AWP meeting you. It really was one of the highlights of the first conference I've ever been to there. So it was just wonderful. And thank you for all the lovely things that you've said. I'm so pleased that you enjoyed The World Between. That means a lot to me.
Oh my gosh. I've been talking to everybody about it over the past weekend, including my biblical Hebrew class.
Oh, wow. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Why don't we start by having you read a little bit from The World Between, and please give the readers whatever they need to know about the reading.
Of course. So I'm actually going to start with the first chapter, but just a little bit about The World Between. This is about a woman who is a former Yiddish stage actress who, after the breakup of her marriage, returns to Tel Aviv to the apartment she once shared with her husband, with her playwright husband, Max. Soon after she's there, she finds herself at the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Apparition Hospice, run by a group of nuns, essentially a sanitarium for people who are suffering from mental illness and nervous breakdowns. And she's unclear how she got there. She isn't quite sure. And so the entire novel is her piecing together the events that led her to this moment. And it's told in an epistolary form. The entire novel is a letter to her husband, Max. The novel takes us from New York to Tel Aviv to a Siberian gulag during the Second World War. So this is a short novel, but it spans continents. And yes. A friend of mine actually coined the phrase, it's an epic novella. So my publisher and I are calling it a novel, but if anyone wants to call it an epic novella, they can. I'm going to begin with chapter 1. My dear, by now Rothman has given you the news in his usual officious manner that I am under observation at the Sisters of St. Joseph of the Apparition Hospice in Jaffa, while this misunderstanding is being investigated. I hope he hasn't implied that I've been arrested or given the impression that I am incapacitated, or God forbid, that you need to leave the comforts of our apartment in New York for Tel Aviv now that you've been apprised of the situation. Please, Liebchen, don't even consider it. You know how Rothman exaggerates. Besides, he has no idea how much you detest flying or how unsettled you get venturing out of our Upper West Side neighborhood, nor does he know how attached you are to Stein's newsstand on Broadway and 92nd Street, and the only place on the West Side that still sells the Volkswagen Gazette, along with those violet candies you like. And what about Zabar's? I've never seen whitefish salad or corned beef in any of the local shops or markets here. God knows there isn't a bagel to be had, nor the kind you're used to. No, it's best you stay home. And please don't pay any attention to what Rothman says, because I have not, as he so eloquently put it, lost my marbles. At least the doctor treating me doesn't think so. Dr. S. is a well-respected physician in this institution. He has charged me to write this letter as part of what he calls my wellness plan. Corral your thoughts, he says, and then after a great puff on his meerschaum pipe, he points a fatherly finger at me and advises, tell your husband everything. He'll understand. Dr. S. often speaks in declarative sentences as a way to spur his patients to action. I admit my mind whips here and there, summoning up all manner of debris. But Dr. S. insists that I get the facts down on paper and state unequivocally that I am well attended to here. I will regain my strength and return home to you. Our lives will resume their natural course, which is to say, I will be myself again very soon.
Yes, thank you. It's a great introduction to that personality you've created. She's quite a woman. She's fascinating. And I'm curious, did she come to you fully clothed in her past, or as a hint of an idea, or something in between? How did she evolve in your mind?
I think she naturally formed in my head, fully clothed, as you say. There were parts that were kind of skeletal that I needed to flesh out in terms of her past. But the kind of woman that she is, an actor, a Yiddish stage actor, a sense of presence, a woman who has gone through quite a lot in her life. I knew that she had spent her childhood in a Siberian gulag. I wasn't exactly sure how she got there, who she was there with. But once Rothman came into the picture, the two of them it was a perfect match for me. Rothman really came to me fully clothed. I don't remember kind of even questioning, like, who is this man? There he was for me. The interesting aspect is that there were sections of this that I wrote as other things, right? That I had tried writing a story, and there was a specific section there. And when I was writing this book, I thought, oh, that section, okay, I'm going to cannibalize that and put that in this story, because the way that it was structured, the way it came to me, obviously, was nonlinear. There was nothing that began like at point A and went to point Z at all. There was always this sense of fragmentation, because I wanted that structure, that fragmented structure, to mirror who she is and her state of mind at that point. So,
well, you achieved that. And with these staccato-like chapters, I found that structure fascinating. Was that your original intention? How did that happen?
I think that happened organically. I mean, I've always been interested in creating a kind of kaleidoscopic, is that a word? Right?
Yes, it is now if it weren't.
It's now a word. This sense of a kaleidoscope of all of these different fragmented pieces that create a full picture, right? I have a daughter who's an artist, and I think about the way that she composes things, right? She doesn't paint, all together. There are sections that are created and then later on painted. And so that sense of composition, structure, fragmentation. I also had this sort of this image in my mind of a great big plate of history and just dropping it. And then taking the shattered pieces and seeing how I can put them together.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful.
So that was a big element. And I was interested in writing about a theater person. I have a BFA in acting, and I studied acting for like 10 years. And I had never written about an actor before, and I thought I'd really like to do that here.
Well, you did it beautifully. The prose is so spare, yet it's richly layered and textured. You and I spoke a bit at AWP about the struggle and the wonder of discovery when we're seeking the perfect phrase or word, and then dealing with rhythm and tone. I would love you to share a little bit of your writing process, how that struggle and discovery plays out for you in your writing.
So I think, again, because of the theater background, I always think of how should I be developing a character. When I acted, I would create a biography of the character, and that's the same thing that I do for my characters, although differently. When I was an actor, I would create, let's say, letters in the voice of the character to the other character that I was on stage with, for example, and say the things that were not in the text. And so that becomes part of the subtext. So when I'm creating character here, I actually do it by the seat of my pants. I mean, I'm thinking about behavior. What is she feeling now? What is her objective? What does she want to get from this other person? What does she want to get in terms of the entire narrative arc? So here she goes into this place, and the frame and the push for this character is, how do I get out of here? That is one thing, but then there's her inner life that is actually the thing that's holding her back. So there we have the dramatic conflict, right?
Yes.
So those are the kinds of things, kind of from the actor's point of view, that I take and place into my narratives when I'm writing. And it's kind of exciting to do that because I always see my characters on stage. I always imagine them kind of in an arena, and what does it look like 365 degrees around them? What's the weather like, the lighting like, the smell like, the interaction with the other person? What is she not saying is equally important as what she does say out loud. So for me, one of the most exciting aspects of writing, besides creating character and place and all of that, is developing dramatic tension in a scene. And then finally in an entire book. It's difficult to do because you're always having to think where tension is created. Is it created in dialogue? Certainly it can be, right? Is it created in action? And again, that's another place where it's created in action. But so much of this novel is interior.
Yes.
So how do you create dramatic tension when this is basically a monologue, right?
Yeah.
Or, it's not a soliloquy because she is addressing it to someone, but this monologue. So everything is from her point of view. How do you make it so that the reader wants to turn the page? That is the challenge, right?
You achieved it. You've definitely achieved it. Just an aside, interestingly, we have a very similar background in that aspect.
Oh, wow.
I tried to be a singer, actor, but that's another story.
For me too, by the way. We'll have to discuss that at some point.
Yeah. But it really informs my storytelling completely. completely. Because the character becomes real and I embody whatever character I'm writing.
Me too. Me too. And a lot of, like, I know people write in cafes. I can't do that because so much of what I'm writing, I say out loud. I need to be able to hear the rhythm, right? And I have to imagine, like, what is this dialogue going to sound like? You know?
Yes.
And so I'm like chatting away there, you know, as I'm writing. Not very comfortable if you're doing that in public, you know, so.
Yeah. You can pretend you're on the phone, but it doesn't work.
True. Yeah.
The world between is more about the past than the future, or even the narrative present. Now, I often think of memory as our personal mythology, the story we tell ourselves about how we became who we are. And that's what it appears to be in this book. Please talk about your perspective on the subject of memory and how it plays out in your writing.
So for me, memory is like another character. It is fully present on the page for a few reasons. One, because I think that most people, or many people, or at least the characters that I write, I should say, live in their heads, right? They live in their heads. They also live in their bodies because there's a lot of anxiety and angst and all sorts of things that they're thinking and feeling. So memory becomes this way of connecting to themselves and informs who they are in the moment that they're on the page. The other aspect is, as a Jewish writer, I feel like the entire history of the Jewish, of the Jewish world, not that it's on my shoulders, but I feel that the aspects that I write about have a lot to do with family stories and the way that they get woven into threads of them, not like the story in its entirety. But for example, this unnamed narrator spends the war years in a Siberian gulag. My mother was actually born in Orsk, and then the family, she was Polish, came from Polish grandparents. My grandmother was pregnant when they were deported. She wound up having the baby in Orsk, and then they moved further into Siberia. And so they spent the entire war in Siberia. My grandfather was immediately drafted into the Soviet army. So there are aspects of this particular narrator whose life is, a little bit like my grandparents' and parents' life. My grandmother was a laundress in Siberia. This woman's mother also a laundress. So there were certain things that I used, and it's a way for me to keep them alive for me and to give them honor, in a sense, that these people lived, and they lived a Jewish history, a specifically Jewish history, as well as a world history. And so all of that, I think, is important today. I think these stories, people writing about this history or our current present or past history is all important at this point, because we will not be erased.
No, definitely.
Yeah.
I get more bullshit about that as time goes on.
Me too.
Yeah. How is writing The World Between different or similar to writing Anatomy of an Exile? And is there anything that you learned from the first book that you were able to use for the second in understanding what it took to write the novel?
So the first novel actually took 10 years to write. Even though I did an MFA and I knew how to write a short story, writing a novel is like, tossing plates in the air and trying to keep them up there without falling, right? Many, many, many plates. It's a much bigger novel. It sweeps a much, not necessarily more time. This one is actually more time in terms of the narrative. But that novel was about a specific family with many characters. It was about Israelis and it was about Palestinians, and the relationship between these two families living in this building in Brooklyn, right? The Israeli family immigrates after the death of a beloved sister in what appears to be a terror attack, but is in fact a love affair with a Palestinian man that ends in tragedy.
Wow.
And that's the beginning of that novel. And then it moves 5 years ahead. It jumps 5 years ahead to when the family is supposed to be returning to Israel. And the wife, Tamar, who is the main character, it's a third person story. So that's very different than this one, which is in first person. What I learned writing that first novel, well, first of all, it was so hard to write, and it was so hard to try to get it right. And it was important for me to really get it right because I was dealing with subjects that were so sensitive. I had a Palestinian sensitivity reader read the novel twice.
Good.
The first time she gave me many, many, many pages. And I felt this sense of like, oh my God, I had thought I had done my job here. And I was both really, really grateful and felt bad, that I hadn't gotten it right. I didn't know exactly what would be insensitive, right? It wasn't exactly what I thought.
Right.
So after she gave me the first round, I then had her read it again, the 100 pages of where that family lives in the novel. And she was wonderful. She was just amazing and really gave me good feedback. And I was able to get the novel, I think, where it needed to be. So there was all of that. But I was exhausted after that novel. I really was. That had lived in my head for 10 years. And then it took another 6 for it to finally, revise, get published, find 2 agents, not just 1, 2. And then the second one placed it with Delphinium Books. The first one tried to place it with bigger houses. That did not. Yeah, I don't think they knew what to do with the book, frankly.
Right.
And so, but Delphinium really took a chance on it. And they took a chance on the world between as well. And I'm so incredibly grateful to my editor, Joe Olshin, and publisher, Laurie Milken. They are amazing and I think courageous, for publishing my work. Because especially The Anatomy of Exile, not an easy story, especially when it came out in 2025, and in 2023, I was in the middle of final edits. I couldn't look at the book for 2 months.
Wow.
I was just so devastated by October 7th. I thought, how could I write a book like this? It's a love story. There were 2 Palestinian love stories that bookend the novel. The big love story between an Ashkenazi and a Mizrahi, Ashkenazi woman and a Mizrahi man. That's the marriage, right? That's the big, affair here. But I really had a tough time. And then I thought, you know what? This is exactly the book that needs to be out there now.
Yes.
So
yes,
that was it. But The World Between felt like it was a relief. I wanted to write a completely different book. And there are some themes that are the same here. The idea of straddling 2 worlds, Nishta High, Nishta Hale, which is not in The Anatomy of Exile. That was something that I wanted to probe much more here. This idea of the betwixt and between.
Right.
So, yeah. I don't know if I've answered your question, but this was, in a sense, easier to write because I was writing from first person. And I had also decided I wanted to do something that was not linear. I wanted to do something entirely different. And that's this book.
We have to talk. I'm going through exactly the same thing right now. Exactly. I'm 2 years behind you.
That's good.
I love names.
Mm-hmm.
You chose not to have names for your main character. Rothman doesn't have a last name. I'm first name. Max doesn't have a last name.
That's
it's like
right. Yeah.
Dr. S. I love names. I love the weight that names give to people and to characters in our writing, and they define lives. And you chose not to use names, which gave it, I guess, part of the ethereal aspect of the book. And I love that aspect of it. I'm going to take you somewhere different right now.
Okay.
I'm obsessed with names. So, of course, I looked up your name, Zeeva. And I found two different possible etymologies.
Okay.
The first meaning is radiance or the light of God.
Mm-hmm.
And the other root would name you a wolf.
Yes.
I imagine both meanings apply at different times when you're writing. And what do you think, she-wolf or radiance in your writing?
So I think as I'm writing, it's she-wolf, this sense of like holding, kind of hoarding, holding on to food, holding on to something that feels that I'm gnawing on. Let's put it that way. It's like a bone that I'm gnawing on. So there's the she-wolf. And actually, I was named after my grandfather, who was Zeev. So I am actually Zeeva. And that's
which is a wolf.
I was born with. Yes, which is a wolf. And that's the name I was born with. When we came to the U.S., no one could say Zeeva at all. And so they turned it both, they just, in school, it became Zeeva because they read Z-E-E, right? V-A. Mm-hmm. And instead of Zeeva, they didn't put the apostrophe between the E's. And so it was Zeeva, right? So
yes.
And that's kind of how it stuck. So there are people who call me Zeeva, very few. Mostly everyone calls me Zeeva. So yes, in a sense, I do feel like the she-wolf, right? I mean, I think there's a wolf in all women, frankly.
Yes.
And then in terms of the radiance, God willing, the work that I've created has a specific kind of radiance, as sad as it might be, or as happy as it might be, that it sparkles with something. I don't know
Definitely.
what that something is, but that it radiates something, some kind of heat,
It radiates light and heat.
Yeah.
And also it radiates a musicality that just... you can feel the weave of the musicality in it very much.
Oh, that makes me feel great because I also was a singer at some point. That was something that I wanted to do. But over the years have basically kind of lost my voice. I mean, I'm always thinking, that's why I read it out loud to myself.
Yes.
To hear the music in the language. And if it doesn't sound right, if I'm hearing something, and that doesn't mean that it isn't dissonant. I appreciate dissonance, right?
Yes.
But it needs to ring with something that feels right to me.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I would love to find out if you have any advice for writers who are at the beginning of their journey. What have you learned over the past years of trying to, to come to your overnight success?
So not overnight. Oh my goodness. It is, here's what I would say to young writers, or not so young writers, anybody who's starting out. Two things. Number one, please know that you have to be dedicated and persistent.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you need to write necessarily every day, but you need to write and read a lot. And when you're reading, you can't just read as, oh, this is a beach read and I'm going to enjoy myself. You need to begin reading with purpose, to figure out, how did the writer create this character? How did they set up this plot? What is the narrative arc? What does each character want? And do they get it at the end? And then that's one aspect. The other aspect, how do they compose the sentences? Is there anything that sticks out to you that you feel like, you kind of suck in a breath because it is so beautiful or moving in some way? So I think that there's different aspects of the written word that we need to pay attention to, especially in stories and novels. I would encourage people not to begin with a novel, although I know some people do. I would encourage them to begin with short stories, not necessarily flash fiction, but a short story that has a narrative arc, that has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes.
That doesn't need to end in a perfect resolution, but that needs to end with the kind of satisfaction that a reader wants. Learn how to do that and then apply it to something bigger. But I think I think everyone needs that foundation. And then I think there's the reading a lot, as I stated, there's the writing a lot, and study with people you admire. That was a huge thing for me. I did my MFA. I didn't know any of the teachers. This was back in the day at Brooklyn College, and they were great. They were all great. But afterwards, a few years later, when I saw, hey, nothing's really cooking for me here, I feel like I needed to do my own MFA. I studied with Alice McDermott. I studied with Hannah Tinty. I studied with Yoon Lee, Patrick Ryan. I had a few, Christopher Sorrentino. I studied with people that I really wanted to study with and learn from. And that for me was kind of creating my own MFA. I don't think you need an MFA, but I do think you need to study with people that you admire, people that you want to learn from. I think that's important.
Yes. Yeah. Excellent advice. Thank you so much, Zeeva. This has been great.
This is
my guest today was Zeeva Bukai, the winner of this year's National Jewish Book Award for debut fiction for her novel, The Anatomy of Exile. We've been talking about her recently released novel, The World Between, both published by Delphinium Books, and both which you have to get and read, folks. You can connect with Zeeva on her website, zeevabukai.com, as well as on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. As for me, my two newest books are Of Being Woman, a collection of feminist science fiction from Noble Fusion Press, and Daughters of Eve from Byrdcliff Publishing, which is an essay-based workbook and journaling guide for exploring the nature of our lives today through the lens of the stories of ancient biblical female archetypes. My website is sallywienergrotta.com. And you can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, sometimes on Blue Sky, and on Substack. 2 Substacks, actually. My personal page of essays, interviews, and such. And here on Judith Magazine's Tell Me More. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Zeeva Bukai. This was fabulous.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Sally. I loved it. It was great. Thank you.